welcome to the African Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is, can the current superstar African musicians learn from and emulate the great Fela Kuti's political stance on democracy, human rights abuses, and corruption in Africa and Nigeria in particular in the 1970s? First of all, I'm referring to the current superstars in Nigeria today as well as other African countries. We're talking about Davido, WIZKID, BURNERBOY, TEMS, Savage, Kizz Daniel, Olamide, Sarkodie, SHATAWALE, Master KG. I mean, basically all these big superstars in Africa today. You are the ones I'm talking to this morning. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because, yes, I understand sometimes people don't want to get political in their music or entertainment industry and all that. I get it. But today's economic climate of Africa has justified why people of influence, like great musicians like you, should be able to take a stand on a progressive form of governance for all of Africa and your respective countries. Because in the 70s, when Fela took his stance on the level of corruption and abuses in Nigeria, it landed Fela in trouble. And at some point, Fela had to flee Nigeria and stay in Ghana for a while before later moving around and then returning to Nigeria. So Fela, the great Fela Kuti himself, sacrificed for what you guys today are able to do in your various African countries today. So that is a choice. I mean, not everybody can become Fela, not everybody can become an activist. But this is not about activism. This is about looking at your various African countries and taking a stand on the human rights abuses, the level of democracy, as well as the level of corruption that has hindered growth and that has taken Africa back over 100 years of economic development. And for one thing that you guys have to realize is that when Africa rises and Africa becomes economically developed, it helps both the music entertainment industry as well as the general population. Africa has the highest or the biggest population of youth of the world today. Africa has the biggest population of the youth of the world today. And you guys have a lot of influence. You guys have a lot of influence on the youth. And the youth of Africa today is our future. And so it is up to you guys to take a progressive stance on your fellow African governments so that the future generations of the African youth and children will benefit from what you guys are going to do today for the rest of Africa. So this is not about being in politics, or this is about choosing sides about the political parties in your various African countries. No, this is about fighting corruption, human rights abuses, and the level of democracy, the deteriorating level of democracy in Africa. That is what this fight is about. So take your hats off, and put away your tribal alliances or political alliances and all that stuff. And let's look at it with one lens, that this is about getting Africa right for the future generations. And to do that, we don't have to be partisan. We have to be bipartisan on this issue. So basically, you are calling out all political parties in Africa. It doesn't matter which party you like or which party you don't like. When you're talking about fighting for human rights, democracy, and corruption, it doesn't have to be about parties. It has to be about the systems. the systems that have taken Africa back, the systems that has created this kind of level of poverty in all of Africa. And that is what this fight is about. So you guys, please, you have to take a progressive stand on these issues. And first of all, let me also state this. Yes, there are some risks involved, but today's world system, the world situation today right now, with social media and all this access to different news all over the world and stuff, it is going to be very difficult. It is going to be very difficult for any African country to blackball any musician in their country or musicians of Africa because they took a positive stand against corruption, human rights abuses, and democracy. It's not going to happen because the African governments right now themselves, they know better. They will not even dare try, because if they do, their government will be gone. Because the world today will not stand up, will not sit aside for African countries to abuse their citizens who are on the street protesting or fighting for human rights abuses, for democracy, and against corruption. The world today will not stand up, will not sit down for that to happen. So for you guys to understand, yes, I get it. I get the political ramifications and all that stuff. But you know what? They can try, but they can never do anything to you guys, because you guys have the youth behind you. Because if you look at your sources today in Africa and around the world, you are the beacon for most of African youths today. You didn't have to go through this political thievery. You didn't have to steal from your people. You work hard on your own through the help of your families and friends and all of that. And you have become successful because of your hard work and your dedication to your crafts. You were not politicians. You didn't steal from the government. You didn't steal from your fellow citizens like the politicians of Africa do today. They are thieves. So they will justify everything they want to do to preserve the status quo that they live in. But you guys are coming from a different angle. You have built your wealth on your own backs by the help of your families and friends and the people of your various African countries. So you can take a stand on these issues that is affecting Africa and various African countries. I mean, just imagine. Sometimes when we talk about the level of corruption in Africa, we don't assess it in terms of looking at the level of poverty and what do you call it? The child mortality rate, women mortality rate in Africa, the hunger situation in Africa. But if you look at all this level of corruption in most African countries, these governments who have been corrupt have contributed to all of these issues I'm talking about. Can you imagine if there had not been corruption to some extent, the level of corruption in Africa, how some of these money that is supposed to help develop schools, hospitals, the society, social amenities for the people of these various African countries, can you imagine what these programs, these projects would have done to curb the infant mortality rate in Africa, the woman mortality rate in Africa, the pregnancy mortality rate in Africa, the poverty rate in Africa? All of these are happening. People are dying. Children are suffering with different kinds of diseases, malnutrition, all of that because of some selfish, corrupt politicians. So if you guys are going to stand up and take a stand on this issue, this is a fight that is worth fighting for. And that is what the great Fela Kuti did. Because today we hear about Fela Kuti, we talk about Fela Kuti and what he did and all that stuff. But he did this at a time when things were totally different. He put his life on the line. He had to flee Nigeria because of his political stance on these things. But he believed in it. And he went ahead and did it anyway. And today, most of you guys playing Afrobeat in all of Africa and Nigeria and all that stuff have benefited for some of the stance that Fela Kuti took in the 1970s. So you guys have to take a stand, my fellow brothers and sisters. Let's take a progressive stand. Let's take a stand that will help move Africa into the 21st century, where Africa will become developed, where Africa's children growing up today and the future generations of African children will also benefit, and talk about one day your role in bringing that development to Africa. So as fellow Africans, I'm saying it again, this is not about getting into politics. This is about looking at your various African countries and see what is going on there. We all know what is going on in our various African countries. We all know the level of corruption going on. We all know the human rights abuse, and we know what these things are doing to the African economies. This is hampering growth in Africa. This is what is killing Africa. What is killing Africa today? Nigeria, Ghana, even South Africa, Congo, all over the world. What is killing Africa today is one thing, which is corruption, corruption, corruption. I mean, this is a country and this is a continent. Okay, this is a continent which is considered the wealthiest continent on earth. But yet, it is also the poorest continent on earth. How come? How come that the people of Africa have to suffer with all this wealth underneath them just because of some few selfish politicians who have used the resources of their various countries to enrich themselves, their cronies, and their families? And it's about time that people of influence like you great superstars, musicians, all of Africa, stand up and take a stand on these issues and fight for democracy, anti-corruption, and human rights abuses in Africa. I mean, we have what they call the World Festival that is being organized by Evan Hughes. I mean, this is a white dude in Europe. This is a white dude in Europe who has been organizing these concerts all over the world for the past 10 years. And what does he do? He raises money through that to help third world countries, poor countries, and mainly most African countries. So if he can do that, who is not from the continent of Africa can do that to help Africans, why can't you, the children of Africa, the superstars who live in Africa today, why can't you also contribute to that for us to lift all of Africans up into the future with great economic development without any human rights abuses and great democracy systems all over Africa? But this is your chance. And this is your time for you to stand up, for you to wake up and take a stand. Because you will be remembered when you do that about how great you guys did when the time came for you guys to take a stand. I mean, look at this World Festival that even Global Festival that Evan Hughes does, organizes. We African musicians can come together and once a year organize these festivals as well, mainly to make a case against human rights abuses, corruption, and democracy for our citizens in Africa. We can do it once a year or once every 2 years, just for that. And that is going to spread the message. I mean, that is going to send a message around the world. Your contribution in helping build Africa, democracy, economy, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day also, this is a platform that other world people will support. If we put something like this together, they will support it. Because the world is yearning for Africa. Okay, the world wants to see Africa develop beyond the level of development that we have right now. And we all know the level of development we have in Africa today can be better than where we are. But because of the level of corruption and the level of abuses by our various African governments, that has put Africa in this awkward and backward position in the world today. Today, when you talk about Africa, people talk about not about what Africans have in terms of quality mineral resources, in terms of quality intellectual abilities, in terms of quality environment, but it's always about poverty. It's always about underdevelopment. It's always about suffering by fellow Africans. It's about time we take a stand on these issues, my fellow Africans, brothers and sisters. You are the superstars. You are the ones who have the mantle today. You are the ones the youth of Africa today look up to. The youth of Africa look up to you today more than the politicians or the corrupt politicians and the corrupt business leaders in your countries in any way than them. So you are the ones that the youth of Africa look up to. And because you are the ones the youth of Africa look up to, that is why this issue is very, very important. Your influence is very, very important. And you can mobilize them. And that is how it's going to start. Because at the end of the day, it's the youth of Africa who are suffering. The youth of Africa are the ones suffering today. I mean, look at all over the world. People trying to escape Africa because of the level of poverty. Because there's nothing for them to think about when they talk about living back home. Because what they see, they don't see hope. The African children today don't see hope in their futures in Africa. So everybody's trying every, even deadly means to get out of the continent. And why should it be so? Why should it be so in Africa? It's because of our corrupt, fraudulent political leaders who are so selfish, who have taken advantage of their political systems and enriched themselves and their families and their cronies. So they create these economic systems in our various African countries just for their cronies, crony capitalism, which is one backward way of economic development. Crony capitalism. Crony capitalism does not develop any country. And that is the kind of economic policies they have. And they also have these socialist, communist policies. Create this kind of monopoly systems so that they can take advantage of it by shoving these industries through their cronies and their family businesses for them to benefit off of the toil of their fellow African citizens. And a lot of Africans have to wake up on this issue because, my fellow brothers and sisters, like I said before, nothing will change in Africa unless we rise up. Unless you musicians, you superstars who have a lot of influence, you also stand up and take a stand and let the youth of Africa today follow your footsteps. And when you do that, I'm not saying it's going to change overnight, but at the end of the day, we have to start by crawling. Okay, we start by crawling, then we start walking, and then we'll be running. That is how we are going to get there. It's going to happen one day. It's going to take time, but we have to start today. We have to start because we cannot wait any longer. Africa is being destroyed by our political leaders because of the level of corruption. It is destroying Africa, and that has created a lot of suffering for African children. I mean, look at the situation that we are in today, right now in most African countries. Because of the pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia situation, look at food. Food is even a problem now in most African countries today. African countries are bearing the hardships more than any other continent on earth today. It's not just because of those circumstances, but because of where our leaders, the path that the African leaders have chosen to take. That corrupt path is what has put African countries in this position today. And it's about time we stand up. We stand up and fight for all Africans in all our various countries, because this is the right fight to fight for. to fight for human rights, to fight for democracy, to fight for against corruption is the right fight to take. It's the right stand to take. And you guys should take the lead and mobilize the youth. Because you know what? These politicians in your country, they are scared. They are scared like hell. They are a bunch of timid guys there. They are not strong. They are scared like hell because they know the youth are coming. And when you guys take this stand, the youth will follow you and get rid of all of them and change your political systems. Change the political systems that have given these corrupt politicians opportunity to keep going back to your government and stealing from you people. And at the end of the day, it starts with you guys. So if I did this video today, I did this video to you great superstars today of Africa. Davido, Wizkid, BURNERBOY, SHATAWALE, Sarkodie, Tima, Savage, Olamide, Master KG, and all of you African musicians who have broken through the limelight of music in the world today. Use your position, your influence, because you have a lot of influence today. You have more influence, positive influence than these corrupt politicians in your various African countries, because the youth of today look up to you more than them, because they know where you guys came from and how hard you guys worked on your craft and built yourselves to the positions that you guys are in today. You ain't given anything by nobody. You didn't have to go steal from somebody and ride in nice houses and live in nice houses and ride in nice cars. You built it yourselves. You work hard with yourselves and your families and friends. And that is what got you where you are today. So you are the genuine role models for Africans and African youth, not those corrupt thieves, politicians in your countries. So thank you guys for listening today. God bless you and God bless your week. If it's Sunday, it's the African Weekly Talk. And we'll come back next week and also talk about something else that will always uplift the African people in the African community. Thank you. Peace and love, and God bless you.